del Motor Valley Fest è un tema particolarmente sentito.
It is very interesting topic, and this topic, smart road and self-driving cars and autonomous driving. We know that cars today resembles to huge smartphones, traveling smartphones, and so everything highlights problems concerning data and privacy, and we will analyze these issues during this roundtable. So we have some institutional greetings by the Mayor of Modena, Giancarlo Muzzaretti.
Sì, buon pomeriggio. Ne approfitto.
Good afternoon. I think that this particular topic is very important because it is included in a wider concept that it is not just related to the Motor Valley, but to the new ways of considering vehicles and city organization, because we have to include all these matters. We cannot discuss about driverless cars or about electrification. We have to reorganize from an urban point of view our cities. And this is very important because the challenge of the research together with our university is linked to the aspects that we have been discussing over these few days. So how is going to be the car of the future? Is it going to be lighter? So we need to find lighter components. And then we have to guarantee compatible aerodynamics, and then the sustainability. That's another topic which must be connected to an organized system, and the fuels, because the self-driving car or the autonomous driving or the assisted drivings must be included in this system of cities with the, for example, connected cameras. You have to organize the system. So what we would like to do as a city is to turn Modena into a big magnet to attract opportunities from a university point of view, from a research point of view. This morning here we presented the accelerator fund for startups in order to ensure quick responses to these topics. And then we wanted to understand how to test and try all these choices in our cities. And I think that the idea that we developed over the last years to develop deep urban regeneration met the first goal, because in this idea of city regeneration, we invested in resources. We created the Data Center Innovation Hub of Public Administration together with the university. And then we have a huge container of our technologies, of our data. And there we developed the MAS project, launched in 2019 during the first edition of the Motor Valley Fest. And then, of course, last year we did our best, on the digital mode. And then this year we restart in presence. So this is clear aspect. We need to boost research to create the condition in order to turn Modena into city with wider technological potentials. We are working on it. I think we have all the preconditions in order to obtain good results. And of course, within all this, redepicting and boosting and including important investments that we made. So we allocated roughly 70 million euros of investments to take part in national tenders, for example, in different, areas up to the digital or artificial intelligence, because we need what I usually say to access the Italian lottery when you take part to these tenders. If we are able to obtain a part of these resources, we can start implementing some important projects, like, for example, concluding the Northern Area strategy, and then so connecting the two strategies. So in all this, we have two important concepts. The first one, that is a general one, that we, started with university, and it concerns cybersecurity. So to use data in a safe way in companies, in society, in the public administration is a huge challenge, even for our safety offices. There are some curricula that should be further implemented and reinforced in universities in order to secure our companies that are static. And in even some states in which want to invest in our territory, this is one of the main factors that we have to consider, because I perfectly know that part of entrepreneurs, when they created some joint venture with companies in Latin America or other countries in the world, they had problems in relation to the use and the management of data. And so this must be absolutely tackled as a topic. And then the other aspect concerns personal data and the relationship between personal data and the use of it through, for example, the use of cameras in order to know where people go. And it's not something taken for granted. It's not simple. We already dealt with it when we started, for example, the first step, because we had to install safety cameras, and we had to decide how to, of course, use data, how to manage them. We keep them for a few days, and then there is a specific procedure that you must apply. And I think this is an extremely important element, because when we accelerate on investments, we must be sure that we checked all the aspects all throughout the system, so that we can develop a city system that is absolutely in line with the needs and safe, and of course in respecting the right of freedom that is included in our constitution. Many citizens would like to, renounce to this right of freedom in favor of safety. We could open a debate, yes, even a wider debate, and much more challenging. But so I think that these two topics, so cybersecurity on the one side and individual safety and the use of personal data, represent one of the thought that we have to develop, because when we want to complete our investments, we must be sure that we already reflected upon this, and we can continue investments, we can widen MASA, we can say to our companies that we meet all the conditions, to magnify strategies and to be even more competitive within these systems of new vehicles, of new cars. Yesterday morning, we were at the conference in the Accademia Militare, and we saw how many opportunities, so many opportunities, but also some restrictions that we have to deal with. So I think that this these 3 days of the Motor Valley Fest are useful in order to reflect upon this, and I'm following all the conferences because I want to be aware of all the opportunities and the strategies. So I will be here listening to all the hints. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So within this research of the MASA, Modena Automotive Smart Area, we find the University of Modena e Reggio, Gianluca Marchi, which is the Pro-Dean of the University. So the floor to you.
So first of all, good morning, good afternoon actually everyone. I would like to greet everybody on behalf of the Rector of the University, Professor Carlo Poro, and on behalf of this university. I'm always very glad when we have events like this. MASA is the Automotive Smart Area, and it is a living laboratory. It is a laboratory where the challenge is to be able of testing in non-laboratory environments, in real environments like a city, for example, new technologies. And in the specific case, I mean autonomous driving or progressively assisted driving up to autonomous driving. And this laboratory of course, has adopted a multidisciplinary approach. Engineers, IT experts do give their contribution in terms of developing technologies and also for the purpose of envisaging new developments for a certain device, for a certain technology, and the direction that technology should take going further. But of course, MASA is also an economic and legal teamwork and work team as well. So a group of colleagues have devoted a lot of attention to this very special part of our ecosystem that has to go with the development of a new technology. So it's the juridical legal environment, privacy and data management, which is key. You know, the huge amount of money that is generated by new technologies, and you know the ways in which they are utilized, stored, processed, and the purposes they're used for is a key, is a crucial element. So a technology and the affirmation of a technology does not only depend from its internal performance level, which is for sure important, but also by the ways in which such a technology is accepted in a certain context, which is linked to the market. If you consider it from the standpoint of an economist like me, we, for example, consider the ways in which consumers approach this technology, the value of such technologies for them, but also from a social standpoint. In fact, also the legal context is important for framing the use of such technologies, for facilitating things. Now, in these months we've spent together, and in recent years, we've noticed that the price for the legal evolution cannot come in late, at a late stage. It has to happen concurrently. It has to happen at the same time. The technological profile and the legal profile do get intertwined. And a certain form of technology can enable you to approach the legal, juridical environment in one way or the other according to certain premises. The contribution, the legal contribution to the debate concerning the introduction of new technologies goes well beyond the topic of privacy and data management. For example, this morning we had a meeting at the Department of Economics Marco Biagi at Unimore, discussing about the impact of new technologies in the automobile sector and how this impacts on competitive opportunities. So when talking about competitive scenarios and business strategies, we cannot forget the role of the regulatory and legal aspects in different countries and the ways in which they are decisive for implementing certain strategies or giving a certain advantage to a certain country rather than another. Think of the regional governments providing subsidies to certain technologies, which of course means that the demand is going to move away or is going to be attracted by those centers. And also ethical aspects are associated with autonomous driving in more specific terms. So as you can understand, these are very interesting topics, and I'm glad that you and we are considering these topics during this seminar, and that there's a possibility for us to go deeper into the these themes in order to identify some guiding principles also in juridical respect. And with this, I would like to thank the organizers, and I would like to also organize all the participants to the roundtable discussion for their contribution. And I wish you well, and I wish you a fruitful afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Gianluca Marchi, the Vice Dean of the University of Modena and Reggio, and we will also continue to treat this topic later on. Then Mechatronic and Motorist Association of the region Emilia-Romagna, Federico Cappucci, you have the floor. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me. We're very, very glad as a cluster to be in attendance, to be present. And I would like to greet you on behalf of our president, Maria Cristina Garapelli, who would have liked participating to this meeting, given the topicality of the issues you deal with here. Unlike the university and the mayor, I have got to step back for a moment and explain who we are, what we represent, as we are not self-explanatory in ourselves, and we're quite young indeed, so we need to clarify what to do, what we deal with. I'm not going to take much of your time, but at least tell you why we have a close link with this project and with the topics we are dealing with today. So our cluster, Mechatronic Motoristica, that has been supported by the region Emilia-Romagna and deals mainly with research and development in the motorist and mechatronic supply chain, which are two major assets in our territory in terms of the GDP they generate, but also in terms of the advanced level of competences and know-how we can offer. So we can, for sure, give a strong contribution to the evolution of this area. And we would like to create a connection amongst all the actors, all the players who have something to contribute to the development in these areas. And when I talk about the actors or stakeholders, I mean the enterprises from the small startup to the majors, and of course the SMEs also come into play, and I am referring to laboratories, both private and public, competence centers, innovation centers, and all the entities working in the field of training and development. And in fact, this context, the very fact that we are at the university makes this very clear. So Cluster Meccatronica Motoristica is very interested in the automotive business. We're organized into working groups that enable us to go deeper into the strategic topics characterizing our supply our chains. We have a working group in this cluster that is called MOVES, Motors and Efficient Sustainable Motors and Vehicles, that deals with the subject matter of today, or the context of today's meeting. So actually, what we are discussing here is an impact on the surrounding environment and the surrounding region. I was talking about this with a professor of the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia. The technological aspect in the context of assisted driving is further away as compared to the legal impact or aspect that certain actions may entail. Of course, technology is the major driver, but technology is advancing at a very fast pace. And I recently visited the Hyper Club that is going to become a partner of ours in a beautiful environment that is in the forefront of this research area. This is just to give you an insight of what we do and what type of initiatives we carry out. As a cluster, we are part of a European partnership, and I'm referring to a partnership in industrial modernization under the hat of the European Union that aim at applying the 5G to specific industrial contexts. One of them is the application of 5G to the autonomous driving systems. We and 15 more entities have participating in this initiative. We have been introduced by the region Emilia-Romagna, and one of the projects we have presented in this partnership, where we also have regions like Catalonia, Olu region, very much advanced regions in terms of automation technology, where in order to convince other regions that we have a lot to say in this respect, we mentioned MASA. MASA is one of the most important partners within this partnership. I would like to conclude by saying that I'm very, very glad to be here, that I'm interested in following the debate, and I wish you a successful afternoon. Thank you, Federico Cappucci from the MEC Trust, Meccatronica Motoristica della Regione Emilia-Romagna, and then Marzia Minotta Astel follows in the Confindustria, so in the Industry Association context. She deals with mainly with telecommunication.
Buonasera, grazie innanzitutto.
Good evening, and thank you for considering also the telecommunication sector to participate into this initiative. Asso Telecomunicazioni is the association of telecommunication that is part of Confindustria Digitale, the Digital Industrialist Association in this area. We have amongst us also producers of technologies for telecommunication and the customer relationship management. We represent and we are the bearers of the interest of the telecommunication industry, participating to the development of innovative integrated services. And the sphere of application that has to do with all the applications that have to do with industrial applications are areas of major interest for us. They rely on an enabling platform that is based on the 5G platforms, which doesn't mean we have to neglect fixed networks now, but the 5G networks and the 5G platforms have technological characteristics that go hand in hand with the development possibilities offered by our services, with a view to the use cases, as mentioned before, aiming at improving mobility, such as autonomous driving or assisted driving, but also in respect to collaborative services that enable us to develop, thanks to shared information, to develop services that are beneficial to the entire community. These services facilitate mobility, avoid traffic congestion, and therefore they give us an overall beneficial impact for the quality of life of the communities utilizing them. On the other side, the network enables us to manage a huge amount of data in real time, which is associated with the computing capacity at a local level or very close to the area where they are generated, with the support of long-ranging networks. Well, all this contributes to the fact that industrial applications or integration opportunities are very relevant for our technologies. And I would like to go back to certain concepts that have already emerged quite clearly. We are in a transformation phase for both the telco companies as well as the motor industry, where the fundamental element is the construction of an ecosystem. This concept is part of the life of our cities. We have to see how we can adopt certain innovations within cities or within production chains, which means that it is key that we create a trustworthy atmosphere amongst the different categories participating to the ecosystem, especially for industrial commercial applications, for which trust is absolutely necessary so that the final client can attach a value to whatever is created in terms of innovation and integration of services. Data processing and privacy issues. And the scenario I'm describing, data processing entails personal data treatment processing, for which we have a consolidated base of legal principles that apply, and we also have a hands-on experience that our operator can contribute to within these type of partnerships. From this standpoint, I believe that telco companies are reliable companies for managing our data, as they already do it now. The majority of the data we input into the web go through our smart networks. And then there are industrial data concerning the integration of production processes, for example, the smart IoT manufacturing plant. The telco industry can therefore contribute with distinctive consolidated competencies also in terms of secure data management. Cybersecurity is also an issue, and in terms of network securities, we are used to bearing these elements in mind. The most important element in this framework is the convergence between the industry, amongst the different industries, aiming at creating integrated digital innovative services so that we can extrapolate all the benefits you can have from this data treatment.
So the challenge from a legal point of view of these services, on the one side, a personal data processing, we can say that we can take advantage of the principles that are already reinforced, like privacy by design, privacy by default, because if you think about developing services and case studies based on 5G platforms. This is how these services are provided by operators. Unfortunately, we are running late, so if you can draw some conclusions, I just wanted to share with you this information and the idea that operators are there and the importance of generating an effective ecosystem which generates trust so that we can grant the dissemination and distribution of these services and, of course, the fact that they are accepted. Thank you, Marzia Minozzi, sharing thus the standpoint of Aston. Let's analyze the MASA project, Modena Automotive Smart Area, and I kindly ask you to stick to timing, otherwise we have to, shorten next debate. Mr. Gianfranco Silvestri, to you the floor. Good afternoon. Well, first of all, thank you for your kind invitation to this roundtable. SMA is an agency that has been created in cooperation with three private companies, Denise Engineering, Automotive di Modena, and AD Consulting, that I'm here representing as a Chief Sales Officer. The goal of our agency is to be operational operator, in developing smart road, smart mobility projects for public administration, for research centers, and for private companies, in particular working in the automotive field, which want to implement innovative and projects of smart cities. I would like to go back to some statements like the Vice Chancellor said before, the Pro-Dean said before, that MASA is one of the symbol. We are developing this project here and even abroad. And the city of Turin, that's another example. We work with Denise, with Pininfarina, supported by the Politecnico, and we replicated the MASA project in supporting Pininfarina Battista, something that has been launched in Turin. And then the other two statements, the mayor was referring to cybersecurity and cameras. This is something very important. As an agency, what did we do with cameras? Every city is provided with several cameras that are connected. It could be local surveillance, checking the area, or the cars, the traffic. So we took the video flow, and the video input, and we use it in a different way. We identified vehicles, trucks. We can count them. We can know real time if there is a traffic jam or not. We can create an algorithm to suggest to the traffic lights how often they have to switch from red to green. This is, of course, in relation to traffic, but we can also give information to connected cars. We can verify the pedestrian crossing, there are people waiting, and it's important because we take this data, we send it to the car, to the connected car, and this car belongs to a network and share this information with other cars. Mayor was also referring to cybersecurity. Here we are talking about driverless car. We have technologies in automotive, but the connection of vehicles and of all electronic components open up the topic of vulnerability, exactly as the problems that we have in our tablets, in our iPads or smartphones. So one of the topics that we are now developing is that of cybersecurity in the automotive field. Driverless car, and not only. I sped up in order to stick to time, and you are incredibly to the point. You explained them very well, and you were so quick, and I'm drawing conclusions. So what I was saying before, the crossing roads, the pedestrian crossing, when we can verify if there are pedestrians waiting, and we send this data to cars. We have this in Modena. We just cut and paste this open air lab, and we are now replicating this model in Italy. Thank you. Thank you, Gianfranco Silvestri, Smart Mobility Agency, and thanks to your presentation and your description. So, because we now understand better the MASA project development. To this MASA project, a team will be partnered with. We have Alexandra Minchelini, head of manufacturing team, with a specific specialization in the automotive industry. Good evening. I'm happy to be here and proud. Very proud of our collaboration team with MASA. We can demonstrate in this open air lab what is the value of the applications of team for the automotive and the mobility field. We will invest our skills, our know-how, our technologies. You talked about head computing, 5G, Internet of Things, and big data, and this is our added value as teams, and this will allow us to develop new digital scenarios in the automotive industry and mobility. We talk about connectivity, self-driving cars, driverless cars, sensors, cameras that can even prevent car crashes, management of fleet, environmental surveillance, driving systems, and so on. So the aim is to make these scenarios available for the entire community and society, and for the manufacturing team. And for us, it's an opportunity to renew and to refresh our commitment in supporting the country from a technological point of view. Team is an Italian company, and we invest a lot in terms of new technologies, and it's the first telco for expenditure in research and development. We strongly believe in innovation. We strongly believe in this value together in application with the daily life. I'm very happy, and I hope that from our collaboration we can really generate a huge value for all the players involved. So thank you, Mrs. Michelini, because you were also very concise as well as enriching. So we now move to the driverless cars and the smart facilities, smart infrastructures, because there must be a dialogue between the city and vehicles. So during this process, you gather and collect huge amount of data, some even that are personal. So we have to investigate what are the guarantee for the privacy of drivers, but of people living in that areas or people crossing that smart area. So data processing, the rights of the subjects involved, and the respect for the privacy law, and everything is studied within the MASA project by the researchers of the Legal and Ethics department, and this event has been developed with the CRIT, the Unimore, and the Privacy Observatory, and Marco Biagi Foundation. I don't know if Mario Nobile is with us there or in connection. If he's not there, I would like to give the floor to Noemi Miniscalco, Unimore, and the Observatory and Fondazione Marco Biagi. She will speak about the legal basis in data processing in this field. Noemi Miniscalco, to you the floor. Good evening. So, over the previous speeches, we have talked about personal data and privacy, because in experimenting the driverless cars, there are several processing procedures of data, and when you process personal data, you have to comply with all the laws that the protection regulation, of course, imposes on data owner, data processors. And in the experimentation phase, we have to deal with several problems and issues. First of all, is to identify a legal framework for processing, for data processing. They are included in the GDPR, the European regulation, which identifies some provisions, and only with the legal framework of processing, of data processing, you can treat data and in this way we can consider this data processing as licit, as legal, because all the frameworks mentioned by GDPR cannot say if they are okay in this context of driverless cars, of this experimentation field. If you think about asking for consensus as a legal framework of the data processing, this is a suitable beginning for some data, but not for others.
So imagine they go through a public road and say, we make an experiment there on a public road. In this hypothesis, it's very complex to imagine some mechanisms for the acquisition of consensus, because data can only be captured when the interested party goes down that road. And it would be complex to acquire a mechanism to get a consensus based on the different aims. And the same applies to the contract as a further legal base. This could justify some adaptation processes, but not all of them. Just think of the lawful interest of the interested parties, which cannot be authorized by the municipalities, for example. On this basis, some data treatment options could be exercised, but for example, it could not include the smart cams that acquire images during a certain amount of time, and they transform it into metadata, which entails certain critical issues and require a certain balancing mechanism that is complex and arguable. The two further legal bases remain, that is the law and the public interest. In Italy, we cannot refer to the legal basis because there's no legal framework regulating personal data processing within the field of experiments. This was adopted by the German regulator, who has introduced in the Road Traffic Act a specific norm where they decided to regulate this data processing in experimental phases. Sorry to interrupt you, but I would like Mr. Mobili to continue because I'm very sorry to ask you to be interrupted, but we have managed to go back to Mario Nobili's connection infrastructure for sustainable mobility ministry. The man who knows it all. Yes, that's too much. That's too much. So I am very unpolite with taking away the word to our previous speaker, but I was listening with very much interest to the critical analysis that she made. And you know very well, because you have studied also the legislation of various countries. We have the Finance Law 2018 enabling the smart road framework and the on-road experimentation of connected driving and automatic driving. As you said, there's no reference to a data processing or data treatment rule. In this moment, we have already authorized some experiments on public roads in Italy, and in this moment, it is clear that our main objective is to understand what model we're going to utilize. We give it for granted that by a certain date, there will be an extended development of autonomous driving, but there is an interim period that needs analyzing. For how many years will automatic driven vehicles and traditional ones? You know, we're trying to get an understanding of the kind of issues that autonomous driving is going to generate in the traffic of today. At a certain point in time, we won't have this problem anymore. But today, we're mixing up different things, and we know that we can make mistakes. And we don't still have a car that is level 5, according to the classification we all know, but it is very close to level 5. So we are not just considering the type of information that we are collecting in terms of people, times, places, but we are rather evaluating the extent to which a certain car is adversely impacting on the environment around it. Decree 70 of the year 2018 has introduced a new element. The municipalities, through their official communication networks and on-site signs, also with variable message addends, information to the users on possible experiments, which is not done today by dashcam or any other object assembled or embedded into private vehicles or on cameras you wear on your helmet. So we have decided to therefore set the boundaries and said if the municipality or Modena, Turin, Parma, and so on would like to make experiments in a certain road segment, you have to inform the users via different channels so that we can avoid falling into the trap of not respecting road safety principles. We have 3,340 deaths on the road, which compared to an autonomous driving can be reduced for sure. The first framework and the first architecture to enable an experimentation that we would like to evaluate in terms of sustainability, in terms of traffic, and in terms of the coexistence of various driving methodologies is something that we have to consider also in relation to different abled people who have different social or economic possibilities. Because if this would cost 200,000 euros, a big slice of the population would be cut out. So let me conclude by saying that you have to consider the before period, so before the start in the experimental phase, and the after period, so the period after the experimentation. But in this moment, we do not know what the model would look like. Do we have to compress the transitional phase? Do we have to identify certain places that are, limited to the use or confined to the use of certain technologies? It's very complex to do this in cities. Thank you very much for talking about these transition times. And I would like to give back the floor to Noemi Miniscalco, who can draw conclusions and maybe provide some answers to some of the questions. Let me go back to this and say that in this transition period we have to find legal protections for the rights and freedoms of people. In relation to the legal framework in the field of data processing and privacy, we have to find the state-of-the-art solution. None of the legal bases allow us to make it legal or consider legal the set of experiments conducted in this phase. The only solution is the joint utilization of the different legal bases which had already been identified by the Working Group Article 29 in the opinion 2003-2017. It also has some critical issues such as the fragmentation of data processing that take place during this experimental phase. Now, looking into the future, it is very appropriate as well as necessary to identify a legal basis and a legal framework and the public interest task that could be, for example, the improvement of road safety, and therefore be capable of treating data in the field of experimentation according to this principle. Thank you, Noemi. And now over to the next speaker, Gianluigi Fiomiglio, Unimore in Officina Informatica CRID, who deals in particular with the rights of the privacy subject, be it an automobile driver, be it a resident inhabitant of the city on these smart roads.
Thank you. I will provide you with a few suggestions. I would like to refer to the actual rights by the persons concerned. Autonomous driving cars, as well as modern technological cars, are equipped with advanced technological systems that collect and process a lot of data to be processed not just locally, but on the cloud. And so that this huge quantity of data is there for process. We know that the GDPR delivers a set of rights to the persons concerned, but these systems are so complex so that the actual control over one's own personal data is wishful thinking. If you think of typical information society services, the people concerned tend to enforce their rights. And if we had a very useful search engine that is not free, we could think of many services that are not free, and this same system might apply to autonomous driving cars in the future. And there is a different notion away from the right of ownership, but of use for a certain time, which is the cloud paradigm applied to vehicles. So this is my question rather than a statement: how to enforce one's own rights given the growing complexity of vehicles that become sort of black boxes, and that reminds us of the Black Box Society book that was issued in 2015. Thank you. You've been very concise. And now a fourth contribution by Michele Verrazzano from CRID Unimore Officine Informatica, who will therefore tell us how these IT systems might be reviewed to really protect privacy. The floor to him, to Michele Verrazzano. As already said, modern vehicles are smartphones on wheels. This is the metaphor that is used. They can process a huge quantity of data to support our driving experience. Without really talking about fully autonomous driving vehicles, many of the vehicles that we already drive, they are equipped with many technology systems. For example, the cruise speed control, or the parking assist device, etc. And so these vehicles will be equipped with many entertainment systems. When you get to autonomous driving vehicle, it wouldn't make any sense to have a steering wheel or a brake or an accelerator. And so we have to enter into the specific specifications of the vehicles. Once we have a lot of data, the larger and the bigger the system becomes in IT, and the higher the risk for it to give rise to risks, to problems. Many vehicles today might give rise to mechanical risks, or there are also IT safety issues. At present, safety violation issues might appear, for example, to steal cars in order to have the right signal to open, unlock the car and steal it. But anyway, the software can be sabotaged, and this requires car manufacturers and legislators to think of very rigorous processes, certification processes applied to these software products to be put in place. If you think of company cars, or the various types of crash tests and the other types of tests that are meant to measure and assess the safety level of vehicles. So we are really focused on vehicles, but when we talk about autonomous driving, the vehicle is self-sufficient. All these safety issues will concern the whole infrastructure. A vehicle that has autonomous driving today won't have any networking today, but in the future it will be in a dialogue, in a network. So what about the whole infrastructure, communication, and data encrypting? Otherwise, there might be attacks by hackers. For example, the Jeep Cherokee software was sabotaged and hacked so that a vehicle can be hijacked. So these are a few of the legal aspects related to safety and security that should be enhanced. Just a few words about it. Thank you. It is true what you said. You really need to be focused not just on the vehicle, but also on the connected city and infrastructure within which the cars are and have a dialogue and share and collect data, right? Was my question heard, Michele? No, I couldn't hear the comment very well, the question well. Can you please repeat it? I mean, what you said is important, not just a focus on the vehicle, but also on the rest of the infrastructure. The city and its infrastructure that is connected, because data flow, circulate in both directions. There is a two-way flow. Exactly, the issue of cameras, surveillance cameras that pose a security problem concerning the person and the vehicle. For the moment being, the vehicle is the most important object that we are focusing on in terms of safety and security, but the whole infrastructure should be covered. So thank you to Michele. And now, Guido Scorza, lawyer, who is a member of the Ombudsman's Office for the Personal Data Protection, who will make a few conclusive remarks and leave us with a take-home message. The floor to our lawyer, Mr. Guido Scorza. First of all, thank you for your invitation. Conclusive remarks are complicated because we are at day one. We are very far away from the finishing line to see and understand what will happen in this field. I was very pleased to have such a conversation, this talk show in the afternoon, to listen to the Gianluca Marchi's words, the importance of a multidisciplinary approach to deal with and all these related issues, to have the right approach when developing integrated systems. I'm referring to the street network cities and the cars to come. And of course, we shouldn't just focus on technology, but also on rules and regulations, regulatory or legal approach. So a multidisciplinary approach is required. A specific attention should be paid to the question of rights rules and search for rules, if there's a certainty out there, is that once systems have been developed, once infrastructures have been drawn, designed, developed, implemented, and further developed, it may be too late to deal with these issues. That the main challenge is something to be addressed during testing. We cannot really postpone it. We cannot really forget about these issues, and this is made extremely complicated. So, a new scene appears. It's a question of data to be managed, and there is a plurality of subjects that come into play when we think of these smart cars. Well, these smart cars are part of a system that through the cars themselves, and this data can be dealt with, processed, and this data might belong to the owner, to the driver, to the passengers of that car. And so you have a set of persons that anyway are related to vehicles, and we refer also to the owners of other vehicles as well. And this brings us to a first tier of complexity when it comes to the protection of rights, not just the privacy rights to be protected with reference to one individual, but things become much more difficult when you have to protect the rights of a plurality of subjects, different categories of subjects related to this device, the car, and the other car-related devices with different levels of relations. But this is not all. I mean, through the car, a whole set of subjects will go on collecting data, because data will be collected by car manufacturers, by infrastructure managers, by road system managers, etc. The whole data is collected by suppliers of services, navigation services, entertainment services, safety and security services. This already happens today, and data will be collected by insurance companies. So on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have the car at the system, the car at the center, but around it we have a whole set of stakeholders. And the framework, therefore, becomes absolutely complex, and the complexity goes on increasing. And therefore, we should look for a balanced solution. And the idea is to have smart cars on our road as soon as possible, but there are two different regulatory systems. On the one hand, the GDPR concerning privacy protection, and on the other hand, the e-privacy directive when it comes to electronic communication. And so both directives have to be taken into account. So the first moot point is the juridical basis, because the two rules are different. The legitimate interest is not the suitable juridical basis when it comes to the privacy regulations applied to e-information and communication. So the kind of approach to be opted for is based on a multidisciplinary approach. To have this kind of approach, the solution has to be found in the whole system, smart roads, smart cars, smart context, town planning, and rules and regulations have to be designed and integrated into the software, the algorithms that these systems have to manage. A further solution does not exist. A possible alternative might be, and this is a very complex issue, design and development should go towards one direction, and once they get there, everything's perfect. But since they do not comply with the rules and regulations, cars cannot be driven. They have to be kept in a garage. That wouldn't be acceptable. That is why we need to work together towards the achievement of a complex but necessary joint solution. Thanks to our lawyer, Mrs. Corza, let me highlight the hope that this panel discussion can really identify these issues, and the fact that interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity is the way to go when we talk about smart city, smart cars, where citizens' rights are protected at best. Let me thank the speakers, Motor Valley Fest organizers, authorities, listeners who have been patient enough to stay with us until so late today in this panel discussion that has been focused on such a sensitive issue. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to all of you for listening.